want this guy Cusack. I want to know where he is, what he's doing, where he lives. I want him.
Squad, this is 1462. I need backup.
Hey, you don't want to be in here.
I want your opinion. I'll beat it out of you.
A mob war to stop. Take him apart.
Where's Cusack?
He's saving the world.
Chuck Norris. Code of Silence. The toughest cop in the world just got tougher. Chuck Norris. Code of Silence.
All right, folks. So, this is going to be technically the soft launch of something that I introduced last December as part of, our best of the year list and whatnot, right? That would be film discoveries, right? So that would be, so compared to retrospect reviews, where that is basically about films that we've seen before, and we're just sort of talking about it, right? In this case, is going to be films that I've never, or should I say, we've never seen before, but we're just sort of talking about it and just giving like a general review of it, right? So in this case, we will be talking. I selected one film that is hailed by many fans of this individual as his best work, if not one of his best works, right? And the individual in question is the late Chuck Norris. So yeah, this is going to be partly a tribute to Chuck Norris and also a review of the movie that he made back in 1985 called Code of Silence, right? So, before we get to the review of Code of Silence, we'll just do like a tribute to Chuck Norris, right? But before we begin that now, Ricardo, you want to mention just a couple of, passings, that took place last week?
Yeah. So like one is not super important, but like it just kind of important from just a pop culture kind of standpoint, or at least interference. So like if you know who Robert Mueller is, he passed away. He's a like political figure. He was big anti-Trump guy for a while, but it was so interesting how he just passed away, and there's a whole thing involving discourse with respect to that. Not super important, but just would mention. Famous scientist Robert Drivers. You could argue that he's kind of the inventor of the concept of the term meme. It's like him and Richard Dawkins, but like he kind of had some of the ideas first before Dawkins in some ways. So the mere premise of what we think about the genetics and how to think about genetics come from him. And well, all the internet, like how the internet is spread and the mimetic aspect of that and culture is also kind of him too. So that's worth mentioning, I think. The actor who played Xander in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dread, real young, 54, passed away.
Yeah, I heard of that, right? But because don't kill me, folks. Don't chastise me, right? But because I wasn't big on Buffy the Vampire Slayer when it was out, well, a friend of mine actually like mentioned, oh, this guy passed away, and then I checked his age and I saw 54. I was like, jeez, but
right. Yeah, I know he had some drug issues, so that's kind of what accelerated that, I'd imagine.
Okay. Well, I thought it was like health issues, like
Well, it wasn't health issue by the drugs. So his drugs, he used to abuse alcohol. He had an alcohol problem as well.
Wow.
But yeah, the thing is, like, it was, I think, on the anniversary of the passing of that Gilner, what's her name? The other Gilner Buffy.
Name escapes me right now, but
Harry the Spiner, Michelle Trachtenberg.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, so thing is, that Buffy remake not coming out. Like,
how luck the Chloe's out, like,
right,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's that.
Yeah.
That's about it. Worth mentioning of the other people. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine, right? Yeah. So yeah, let's just touch on the big one, that took place last week at the time of us recorded this, right? Yeah, Carlos Ray did not even know that was his name, because yeah,
Yeah.
ever since we grew, ever since we were introduced to this man through pop culture, we just always knew him as Chuck, right? So yeah,
Right.
on Thursday, March 19th, woke up, well, I should say not even woke up, like I just went on social media like around 10ish in the morning. I just saw this man die. I was like, wow. And it was to the
Yeah.
point that I actually like shared that was a Facebook post, Variety, I think it was, right? Yeah, I shared it with a bunch of people on WhatsApp, especially people who I know, who, well, I should say who are older than me, that I know, grew up on, Chuck Norris movies, right? But yeah, that's a touch on the man before we jump into Coda Salads, right? So I will genuinely confess, right, that this technically is the reason why I decided to do this film discovery on Code of Silence, right? When it comes to action heroes, right, I'm very picky. I'm very picky and choosy when it comes to who I prefer as far as, big action heroes and the movies that I look at, right? So I am more of a, like, let me just say I'm a more of a Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm more of the E-list action heroes. That would be like Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, and of course Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? I have not seen all of the films in their discographies, in their filmographies, sorry, right? Because some of them, as I've heard, as you kind of find out through, movie reviews, were kind of trash, right? So there are a few movies in their catalog that I just never bothered to watch, right? But when it came to B movie, action heroes like Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme
Correct.
and Chuck Norris,
Billy Blanks.
and Billy Blanks, yes, yes, yes. And oh, also mad props to Vinegar Syndrome. I'll get to them in a little bit for putting
Right.
out some of Billy Blanks's old films. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
like they put out some stuff. They even put out some Cynthia Rock stuff, and I like what this real hard
Yeah.
though, right? Yeah, 'cause, I would call them C level, action heroes, but I mean they were big, right? But they are more on the VHS side of things, right? Whatever. But yeah. So when it came to Chuck Norris, right? I mean, yes, we know him as the big action star, especially with not just with with guns and whatnot, but also with martial arts as well, right? Yeah, I have not seen a majority of his films. I just never
Right.
bothered to, right? Now let's just talk
Yeah.
quickly into the go
I
on.
mostly know him for. I mostly know him for. Yeah, this is like his earlier stuff, very early stuff, especially with Bruce Lee.
Right, I want to
I
touch on
remember.
that, yes.
Yeah, I remember really liking Delta Force. And then a couple of movies that I just kind of really like. I remember appreciating the movie Sidekicks. Remember that with Jonathan Brandis? That
Right.
was kind
That
of
that
like a
was the
weird,
show. That was the
interesting movie.
show that
Yeah.
actually Vinegar Syndrome released. Well, put out on home media. I
Right.
never saw that film, believe it or not, because even back then
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
was
remember
like,
watching it on King.
this kind of looked like I don't know, like a watered down Karate Kid.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was more interesting than that because of what was going on. It's like, oh, it's not the real Chuck Norris in there. Like it's a whole weird thing. It's like, oh, okay, it was real weird, but it was
Okay,
cool.
okay, yeah. But yeah, when it came to my introduction to him, right? I think for many Gen Xers, right? Especially when we've especially when we grew up on local television like I did, right? Yeah, it came in the form of a little show called Walker Texas Ranger, right? Now
Right,
I
right,
honestly did not religiously watch the show. I just caught up with
right.
some episodes, right? And I used to enjoy it for the most part, right? But at the time it was just like, oh, it's just a primetime action
My
show. It's not like I
friend,
need to miss.
yeah.
It's not like I need to
I
watch it every
so
single Friday. It was like that.
here's the thing. I had a friend who used to just be dogging on Walker how stupid the show was.
Oh,
He used to just be constantly making fun of how incredibly ridiculous the show was as a kid. And then later, well, two things. It took me a hot minute to figure out that the actor who played Trevette, he passed away as well recently.
oh, okay. I
But
didn't know
the
that.
actor, yeah, the actor who played Trevette, he was remember the black guy from Die Hard.
Yes, yes,
Same
yes,
guy.
yes. Yeah, yeah.
It took me a hot minute to like realize the same guy. But
Oh,
then
and,
what
and,
the
and
two
side
things,
note, he got shouted out in the Oscar memoriam. That
right,
yeah, he
right.
got shouted out there.
Yeah. I know he died recently. That was it. And then my friend used to make fun of Walker. He used to be constantly making fun of Walker, how dumb it is. I never used to watch it because he was like kind of religious now, so it was just level CBS that you're watching as a kid. So you know just how bad Walker is because there's that and Touched by Angel and was the other show Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. It's that bullshit, right? Um, but he was that, and then the two things that make me aware of Walker Texas Ranger and Chuck Norris is one, Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien used to do a recurring bit with that. he used to just pull a lever, and it had a really funny thing there. And then, well, the internet meme, right? That's where we kind of know Chuck Norris is super person. Although a lot of people think that should have been Mr. T instead, but whatever. Like Mr. T is the actual, like, oh, they should have do that instead of Chuck Norris, but whatever. Um, but yeah, that's how I just think about him in terms of the pop culture. Like it's just that. But that Conan O'Brien recurrent sketch is really well done and funny. That was like one classic one involving Haley Joel Osment. That's all you need to know. Just look up that one. That one is the funniest by far because it's so fucking random and Conan's reaction is the best. So you should see that.
Yeah, I'll look up that. I'll look up that, right? But yeah, even though I wasn't religiously watching Walker, Texas Ranger, right, I knew how big of a deal it was on local TV, right? In particular, right? In particular, I think this was the moment where I was like, oh, this show have longevity, right? Even when it stops airing or whatever, right? Or when it comes to an end. You see that second theme song? The one that I think Chuck himself sung? When the eyes of a ranger are upon you. That is
Right.
so goated us. Like it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's just so badass, but in a real simple kind of way. I think I know why, right? Because it has that Western vibe to it. It's almost like, yeah, you're watching like some new Western, something like that. There's something
Yeah.
so
But I
cool and
think, I think
badass about that second team. So I love that
but the
song so
problem
much,
is that
right?
it had to be on CBS, so it
Right.
had to be the most watered down, corny nonsense ever.
I know, I
And it's
know.
it is
And yeah, the show is
absolutely
kind of it's on the cheesy side of things. I would admit that, right?
yeah. That's the thing
But the
because
team song
like
made
it
you
have,
believe
yeah
that team song made you believe like, oh, I gotta
yeah
watch some real dread shit, right?
yeah yeah. We have two pop because the problem is that you have two pop culture like dynamics of the 90s. You had the corny bullshit like Seven Heaven and all that nonsense, and then you had the badass or at least what we think is badass in the 90s back then. So something like Renegade. No, Renegade. That was badass.
Wow, I
No,
used to watch that. Not
yeah
religiously, but I used to watch that.
yeah,
Friday
and it was
nights, I
hard.
used to watch
It
that.
was very
And
hard.
again, the
Yeah,
team
exactly.
song for Renegade's so hard. Though, like,
Listen, the opening to Renegade so bad as you just quiet. It's just the guy hyping up what the fella just introducing the character, and you just see the motorcycle riding, and then they play the music. Like,
yes.
can't go wrong.
Also, man, shout out to Lorenzo Lamas, right? I
Yeah,
don't know
Lorenzo Lamas, yeah.
if Renegade is out on Blu-ray, but trust me, it will be. Like the way how home media is
Yeah,
these days, yeah, they're gonna be putting out shit like this, right? But yeah, go on.
yeah, it was hard. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, all right, right. So yeah, so when you're a kid in the 90s, your introduction was that, right? And then like over the years, you kind of knew in the back of your mind that he was in, he starred a lot of 80s action movies, right? Because yeah, in the 90s
Right.
there was Sidekicks, there was I think Top Dog, which not gonna. I didn't care to watch it then. I don't care to watch it
Right.
now, right? I just don't really care for action heroes being teamed up with dogs or animals. It just never worked for me. Even that one with Clint Eastwood, I just never cared for, right? But yeah, you would learn about stuff like Missing in Action and the Delta Force. I'll never forget, Delta Force actually showed on TV6.
Right.
I watched it once.
Yeah.
Didn't love it as much as I wanted to, but it was alright, I guess, right? Very, very, very 80s American propaganda stuff, right? Especially with the backstory and where it was about, with the whole TWA airline, plane terrorist stuff, right? It's like that, right? And then I saw Missing in Action 3 on cable, and I just thought that was just so mind-numbingly dumb and goofy. It was just like,
Right.
is the America fuck yeah approach to the Rambo archetype, right? And I was just like, wow, man,
Right.
like, I could just like watch First Blood and not even care to watch this too. Like I just did not care for that movie at all, right? But I never saw the first one, and I am meaning to watch that, right? It's unfortunate that kind of made that decision because of his passing, right? But let's touch quickly on like the films that that kind of define him, right? And then we'll get to your thoughts. Then we'll jump into Code of Silence, right? Yeah, for me, when I was growing up, I always heard of the Bruce Lee fight the movie where he fought Bruce Lee. I always heard it, right? And then I saw for the first time in my life Way of the Dragon, right? Which
Right.
the alternate title was Return of the Dragon, right? I am a proud owner of that because I have the Bruce Lee box set courtesy of the Criteria Collection, right? But I saw that fight before, right? Because of that movie, right? And to me, that is one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen put to screen, simply because it's the strength versus speed kind of thing, right? Chuck being the stronger guy and he's doing karate, and Bruce being the faster one and he's doing Jeet Kune Do, right? It's just a perfect example of strength versus speed, right? And then the setting of it in the fucking Coliseum, like what? Like this is what we had to do. But just if you get the chance to, Ricardo, just watch that scene or rewatch it. Do it. It's just
that classic.
like
Yeah,
just
I
a
noticed it.
perfect example of choreography. And one thing that blew my mind when I actually rewatched it, like about an hour after the news came out, right, of his death, right, is how to say, boy, like without saying too long, like Chuck starts off with the strength, right, and Bruce is doing the speed, and there's a moment where Chuck is punching Bruce, right, like in the face, right, but then there's a moment where Chuck kind of try to adapt to Bruce's speed, so he's moving quick with the feet now, and then just so out of the blue, Bruce come and start punching, blah 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 blah, like that, like how they just sort of adapt each other's styles, just like that, though. That just blew my mind, though. That is one of the like this perfection shot, right? And then of course that cat that's just there for reasons, so they can just do that zoom in on the cat is so funny, but I love that shit so much, right? But yeah, masterclass of fight choreography, right? But yeah, 80s movies, right? Yes, he was the big action star, one of the big action stars, right? It's just like when you look at it now, you could tell like he was eclipsed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and his rise as an action star, I would say, started with the Terminator, right? Not so much Conan the Barbarian, but the Terminator, right? And then in the late 80s it was Seagal, and then in the early 90s it was Van Damme, and then between that period was Bruce Willis, and before all them was Sylvester Stallone, right? So this always felt like his work was just eclipsed over the thanks to those guys, right? But still, he just managed to carve his niche, right? And then he had the martial arts background, which made him kind of stand out, compared to those guys as well, right? But yeah, when it came to like his filmography, many people will say that Code of Silence is his best work, right? I was on the fence between that and Lone Wolf McQuade, which unfortunately I never saw neither, right? Some people say that is better, but from what I read, it just corny, goofy shit, but it sounds like my kind of corny, goofy shit, right? So I will watch that, when I get the chance, right? But I picked that one, Code of Silence, because yeah, many people hail it as, like just like performance-wise, his best performance, right? And then lastly, even Roger Ebert, like Siskel and Ebert, praising the film, I think it's because they just sort of grew tired of the sort of cliche rules that he was doing in the mid 80s. Maybe that's why they warmed up to Code of Silence, right? But I'll get to that in a little bit, right? But yeah, long story short, I will catch up on his filmography soon enough. It's just unfortunate that I had to do it after I heard the fact that, he passed away, right? It's a shame though, but I will check out his work. I don't say that I will love his films because he passed away. Of course not, no, you know what I mean? But I will appreciate the man even more, right? Because I know he meant a lot to, action movie fans in the 80s, right? Even when, Stallone and Seagal and these guys were big in the dance, right? But I have to close this. Just one last movie I have to mention too. The Expendables 2.
Right.
That is the one movie that I saw in theaters that had Chuck Norris, right? And here's the thing, just talk quickly.
That's why they brought it back. Yeah.
To do the memes, right? So we knew he was coming, right? We just didn't know when he was coming, right? I'll never forget this, right? One of the last, times that I went to Palladium, that's in Tunapuna, for those who don't know, right? Watch this with a crowd, right? That moment where he came in.
I saw that with you. I saw that with you.
I think so. Yes, I believe so.
But in Trinity.
Oh, okay. No. You would have seen that with somebody else. I saw it in.
It's another friend.
Yeah.
Because we was talking about it. Why I saw that way? Because you remember a guy was like kind of saying, don't complain it too corny. Just enjoy it for the action. I was like, yeah, but even with that, it's still dumb because they didn't do anything with the action. But, and I was like, yeah, because I remember thinking the second one kind of sucked.
Okay, well, I am one of the few that think that 2 is the best out of the 4 films, because
I remember enjoying the first one the most.
Yeah, 2 is the most self-aware out of all of them, right? One,
right.
Try to do the self-awareness, but also take itself a little too seriously, even though
but that's why I enjoy one. It's like don't try to like do this kind of comedy bullshit because you're not fun. So
all right.
just let's ramp up the action, make it work. And it have this one scene in one that is like still a classic to this day. That is with Terry Crews with the auto
And
shot
that
thing, right?
good boy, holy
Yeah.
shit! That do
Yeah,
do do
Terry
do
Crews
do
with the
do do
spars.
that boy,
Just cooking everybody.
boy.
Yeah, that was
But
hard. That was it. That's what you need.
yeah,
No, but in the second one, they had this opening sequence that was pretty okay. You know, I hate the fate blood thing. That other problem I had with these movies. They cheap out.
yeah,
I find a
yeah.
way like there are no good reason to be that cheap. And it like
Like I understand.
whatever. You're supposed to watch.
You have Stallone, you
You're
have
supposed to watch John Dangerous
Schwarzenegger,
anyway. So
you
don't
have
care.
Bruce Willis, and you have Van Damme.
Right.
Who I think the reason why I enjoy
Right.
too so much is Van Damme playing a villain, and he played a real good villain though.
Yeah. They had
Like,
a villain in this one.
But
But
I feel like the
they
money
did the
went to them and not to the VFX people.
right. Whatever. So, and I hear Tree was real shit.
Yeah,
I never watched that.
Tree had promise, but it did nothing with it. Like it
Yeah,
had,
so they tried to bring in like a bunch of new like action people, and none of them was like had any kind of
Ronda Rousey was there, and you're just
Right,
there, like, all right, like
And I
okay,
heard-
but you're gonna do something. And it's like no,
And I know they had a lot of behind the scenes stuff involving like Terry Crews and his whole drama with Terry Crews. So I know it had that. But then like 4 was like one of the biggest wastes of time in my life too.
terrible,
So, like,
terrible. You saw it in
Terrible.
cinema. I watched it at home,
Yeah, no,
boy.
it's
I was
yeah,
like, boy,
kinda
I sorry for Ricardo. Boy, Ricardo saw it in
kinda pissed
theaters,
me off a
right?
little bit.
But yeah, but
Like,
that's
kinda pissed me off how bad that was.
yeah, but that's a quick point about Expendable Sue, and then you'll get to your thoughts on his films, right? Before we jump into Coda Sellers. That moment where we see Chuck walking, right? That's after the tank blows up, right? And he heard, I think is some music from either Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or For a Few Dollars More. I know it's some Ennio Morricone music that plays, right? The moment he show up, audience erupted. I stand up and I just was doing the bow that like we are not worthy. That was me. I was bowing at that shit, right? And then like every line he would do, and he was just sort of playing off of the Chuck Norris facts or the memes, you know what I mean? And that was the joke. I was like, yeah, this works. One scene, a cameo. Like I love this. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was the last time that I ever saw him in a movie, like period, right? And that was back in like 2012, I believe it was, right?
Yeah, he was pretty old by then, so it was like whatever.
He was in the 70s. I think early. I think he hit 70 around that time. But yeah, I'll stop. But keep going.
Yeah, the Chuck Norris meme stuff was already played out long before that. So like, I know they're going to do it. So whatever.
Yeah.
And it's for a crowd of people who not like, perpetually the internet like me. So it's like whatever. It's fine.
Exactly.
Like, I get you how to do it. You gotta cater to that crowd. But yeah, I just couldn't get into that second movie because I thought the action kind of stuff and the villain was sick, but it's like they had to rely on the Chuck Norris moves. I know they're good. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right.
And well, he kind of followed that favor because of how conservative he was. It was his worldview. So it's like that. But like if you don't care about that, then moving on. He's a solid action star.
Yeah, so before we get to Coda Salads, right? Any thoughts on, his films, like that appearance in The Way of the Dragon? Like what do you think about him, like as a star, like an action hero in particular? Like your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who never really blew my way. I mean, I remember thinking Delta Force was kind of cool, and that was about it. But I don't remember. I remember like loving him as an action star. Because that's so many other like action stars. Cause he was like a balance of just being a badass guy. He's like a badass military guy. Okay, not like he not meant to be chunky like a Arnold Schwarzenegger or like a Sylvester Stallone. And then he also not super impressive on the martial arts end like Jet Li and Jackie Chan. But he was like in the middle, but he wasn't as like shameless and corny as hell like Steven Seagal. I never liked Seagal. Always thought Seagal was trash. So is that. And then he was never like so low that he was like enjoyable, like say a Billy Blanks or one of the like the real bottom tier kind of like straight to VHS types. So he was just there in the middle for me, and I was never like a super fan, to be honest. Like to be clear, but he still was like solid, and like he's a famous thing, and he was that guy, and he did make it work for all things considered. He had a big prolific career, and really mostly known for Walker's Texas Ranger, which is like some of the silliest shit ever. Like I know watching back the scene with Haley Joel Osment and Conan's reaction, and I forget how dumb and corny the show was. But yeah, is that? But he's a star for a whole audience. It's like that CBS audience, a lot of Gen Xers mostly. He kind of fell into flavor by the time the 90s roll around anyway. So it's like that's why I never get into him. He's more for like my older cousin, I'm sure, is a massive fan of him. So is that.
All right, so let's jump into Code of Silence, right? And just let you all know, this is not gonna be like this in-depth analysis of it, right? I literally saw the film yesterday time we recorded this, so I'm just gonna give like some general thoughts on the film, right? But as I said earlier, this is the film that many people, say is his best film, right? And not saying that this is going to like for subsequent episodes of film discoveries are going to do this, right? But yeah, when it comes to like an actor or a director's work that I've never seen, right? And they pass away, I will more than likely just seek out like the most popular film from them, or in particular one that I just never saw, and I'll just like talk about that, right? Talk about that. So yeah, when it comes to this film here, right, like I say, it's from 1985. It was released through Orion Pictures. And speaking of Steven Seagal, this was directed by Andrew Davis, who directed arguably, arguably Steven Seagal's best film, Under Siege, back in
Right.
1992. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we could argue for days about should above the law is but above the law is better, or what? Oh gosh, Mark Vedette is better. No, Under
Right.
Siege is better because the story is better, the actor is better, and had Tommy Lee Jones in it, right? And speaking of Tommy Lee Jones, he also directed the classic Fugitive, well, the movie The Fugitive, right, with Tommy Lee Jones and of course Harrison Ford, right? So Andrew Davis, not too familiar with his work, right? It's just really Under Siege and the Fugitive that you really know him for, right? But yeah, so I didn't know that he made this back in the 80s, right? And yeah, in a nutshell, this is just a very standard, and I'm not saying this as an insult, right? But just a very standard mid 80s cop movie, right? Right down to the music, which is just delightfully jazzy with the funky guitars and the horns and whatnot, right? Yeah, it's stuff that like when if you were to watch it for yourself, Ricardo, would be like, yeah, like this is how 80s cop movies were, right? This is how they were. This is how they were shot, right? This is how they were directed, all that kind of stuff, right? But yeah, I think one thing that really makes this film stand out, right? I think this is why people kind of gravitate to this and see this is Chuck Norris's best work, right? From a directorial perspective, right? This leans a lot into neo noir, right? So it's set in Chicago, and just like Michael Mann films like Thief, or just neo noir films in general, right? There's a style to just how the film looks, right? Just especially with the nocturnal scenes and whatnot, right? Also, it touches on corruption in the police force, right? So there's a lot of crooked cops and stuff like that, right? Very very noirish, right? And as far as like acting goes, right? Honestly, I am not going to say that Chuck Norris gave the best performance he ever gave in his career, right? But what I will say is that he is playing the man of few words kind of character, right? And I know for some people they will just sort of look at that and be like, oh, they just did that because they know that Chuck Norris can't act, you know what I mean? But no, I don't think so. I think it works with the character that he has played, right? And the character that he has played is Eddie Cusack, right? Who is this sergeant, right? And he it starts off with him trying to bring down doing this drug bust, right? And it involves like these two warring gangs, right? But the plan doesn't play out, and a few people die in the process, right? Now, one of the villains actually is played by let me just say a legendary bad guy when it comes to like 80s movies. Yeah, Henry Silva, right? He's in it as well. He plays
Right.
Luis Camacho, right? So he is one of the he's the leader of one of the drug gangs, right? So yeah, basically it's this gang war that starts because during the drug bust, the rival gang come and fuck things up, and it's just this war that goes on, right? But then in the process, there's this girl whose father ducks out because of what happened, and she gets kidnapped, and there's a moment where Chuck has to go and save her, and it's in this L train and all that kind of stuff. That actually was a really cool moment, right? Because yeah, as to be expected, Chuck did his own stunts, right? So yeah, my boy is on top of on top of a L train, going after this guy. There's a moment where he jumps into a lake after, well, chasing after the guy and whatnot. That was a really cool moment, right? But yeah, it's really about really at the end of the day, it's just about the good cop, right? The cop who is doing everything by the book, right? And he is noticing all these like just little bits of corruption, stuff like people like just sort of get away with murder, right? Literally, one of his superiors gets away with murder, right? Because he is in an apartment right after the drug bust, falls apart, right? And he guns this Latino kid. Like the kid just sort of came out of his apartment, right? Like wondering what going on, right? And then the guy, making the excuse that, oh, I thought he had a gun. He just like pull out a gun and fire two shots at the manager. Like, what the hell was that, right? But yeah, and there's this subplot involving him being put to trial and all that kind of stuff. I will say slight spoiler, it didn't really go anywhere after the trial. That was a letdown for me. People might make the argument that, oh well, it's not really about the outcome of the trial. Like we kind of know what the outcome is. It's just that we thought that he thought the person in particular thought he would get away with it, right? And he didn't, right? But I don't know. Like I'm a man who likes closure in films, so I thought they at least would have followed up on him, but it didn't, right? But yeah, it's really about Chuck Norris and him just kind of observing things, and he just wants to bring these bad guys down, right? But he has to deal with all this bureaucratic bullshit, right? Also,
Right.
people will make the comparison with Dirty Harry, right? Because he is this
Right.
hard-nosed cop who doesn't take no for an answer, and he will not so much break the rules like how Harry Callahan did, right? But yeah, if his captain tell him don't go, don't do this, he will still do it, right? Because he believes in getting the job done, right? He is that type of guy, right? And yeah, when you really think about it, Chuck is playing that sort of dirty Harry kind of guy. He barely smiles, he hardly talks to people. He's just that guy that you just don't want to fuck with, right? I'm not talking about like just like if you see him, you just don't want to mess with him, right? He is that kind of guy, right? But then also too, just like Dirty Harry, he's paired with this younger cop, right? And it's just kind of just there to show like how he works with other people, right? But yeah, as to be expected, I don't want a partner. Where's my old partner and all that kind of stuff, right? Same thing that you got to Dirty Harry, you get here in this, right? But yeah, it makes
Right.
up for some good moments as well. That guy in particular, the younger cop, actually saw the older one shoot the kid, right? And he was afraid to speak up about it, right? But when it came to the trial, he actually does, right? So I like those moments, right? And one thing I will admire about the show too is that it's not like a action heavy show, right? And I know for certain, Chuck Norris fans that might be a letdown. They might go into this expecting a lot of explosions and bullets and stuff like that, right? Like they might be expecting the military stuff, like say Missing in Action or what you call it, or Delta Force, right? But it's not that type of show, right? And I do admire the fact that the show kind of respects material. It's like with telling a story here, folks. Right, it's not just about action and shoot 'em up moments. We're telling a legit story here, right? So yeah, I thought that just behind the camera, Andrew Davis did a solid job, just capturing that noirish Chicago setting. It looks very good. Even though it's an '85 film and it's shot on film, right? But it looks very very good, right? Some great shots here or there, right? Again, just going back to the acting, right? Now, yes, the supporting cast kind of have to hold, they do their job, right? But I don't want to say that they are holding, they kind of propping Chuck Norris, right? But I think that yeah, performance wise, Chuck Norris did a really solid job here, right? I like the fact that he is legit acting here, right? He's making an effort to act, right? And I could tell, even though this is the first time I've seen this film, right? I could tell like he probably welcomed this performance. He welcomed this role like, hey, I don't want to be the Lone Wolf McQuaid guy or Braddock from, Missing in Action. I don't want to be that muscle-headed, beefcake, action hero. Like I want to show that I can act. I can be a character. I can play a role, right? I'm not saying that he gave an Oscar-worthy performance here, but I thought like just performance wise, he did a decent job, right? Not brilliant, but he did a decent job, right? And again, just the about a few words kind of character, I think it works for him in that case, right? And yeah, he gets moments to kick people, he gets moments to shoot people, right? So you get your action moments, right? It's just that the story plays out, and you just have to wait, a while for the story to build, and then you'll get the action sequences, right? I'll close this, right? Yeah, and just, just action wise, yeah, the action sequences are solid for the most part, right? Nothing mind blowing, nothing amazing. This is not like, like a Schwarzenegger movie that you're watching here, or a Stallone movie that you're watching here, right? But given the neo noir aspect of things, yes, it works, right? It's not too over the top, it's not too unbelievable. It feels very logical, it feels very realistic, right? Even when, there are these very high octane action sequences, right? Especially the final sequence where, yeah, things kind of go a little over the top, but that's the point, right? You wanna kind of close your 80s action movie off in a bag, and I thought that for the most part, they did a solid job, right? So yeah, at the end of the day, I can understand why people say that this is his best film. I think it's just because it is against type. It's against how we always viewed, Chuck Norris, right? As either the Texas Ranger or the guy in Vietnam shooting people, whatever it is, right? It's a cop who is dealing with this moral dilemma, and he just wants to do right, and he just kind of is forced to do what it is he has to do, right? And that's where it is, right? Again, I'm not saying that he gave this Oscar winning performance, but I thought, like, yeah, given the character, Chuck Norris really did a decent job, right? And the show as a whole is decent. It's a show that I could see myself buying on Blu-ray, but it's a show that if it shows up on cable, I would say watch it. If you have nothing else better to do on a Saturday, watch it. And yeah, I guess over time I could, I will watch his other films, and I can come back to Code of Silence and say, yes, this is his best work, or I might say Delta Forces or Missing in Actions, right? But I mean, if people say this is his best film, okay, cool, whatever. I'm not gonna question that for now, right? But that's coming from people who know more about his filmography than I do, right? And I do hope to watch more of his films in the near future, right? And I do hope that many other people will check out his filmography too, right? Again, it's unfortunate that it had to be because he passed away, but I think that more people will appreciate his work. See that he did pass away. They will see him. They'll appreciate him more as the more of the actor and the action hero, and less of the Chuck Norris facts, right? The meme guy, right? Or whatever it is, right? So yeah, rating wise, I'm gonna give this 3.5 out of 5, man. It's worth checking out. Again, if you see it on cable, watch it. You will enjoy it for the most part, right? But again, it's not like the greatest action movie that you'll ever see. And I guess like for diehard Chuck Norris fans, they will prefer more of his goofier stuff, or more of his, America fuck yeah kind of movies, like, Delta Force,
Right.
or, Missing in Action or stuff like that, right? Or God forbid, they might prefer the stuff from the 90s, like Sidekicks or Top Gun,
Right.
or Top Dog, right? The more family friendly stuff. I don't know, right? I guess it's up to you, right? And yeah, as we wrap things up, though, I mean, RIP to, a real, action hero, man. You know what I mean? I'm glad that, co-stars of The Expendables 2 actually shouted out, actually did RIP tributes to him online, right? Like
Yeah.
Stallone and Dolph Lundgren. I think Van Damme says something, right? I don't know if Schwarzenegger said anything as yet, but I know he
Right.
should, right? Given the fact that they starred in Expendables 2, and they probably knew each other years before they even started that film, right? But yeah, RIP to a true legend. Again, I hope that more people would check out his work, and appreciate him more of the actor, the action hero, not just the meme guy, right? So it is what it is, right? But yeah, again, I will check out his work, but I will say that Code of Silence is a great entry point into his filmography, right? And I'll stop there, right? So Ricardo, final thoughts on the legacy of Chuck Norris, and then we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys who, again, I was not the biggest super fan of him that much, and yeah, his later career slash like political views kind of sour me on him a little bit. But for the most part, yeah, he's a great action star, and I always think of him as just, I'm sorry to say it loudly, think of him in the more like humorous, ironic, making fun of him stuff. Like again, just look up that Conan O'Brien bit with Walker Texas Ranger and Haley Joel Osment. You need to see that. That shit funny as hell. Yeah, the memes, like just the Chuck Norris facts and the factoids, which again should have probably been Mr. T in another timeline, but whatever. Yeah, I RIP a real one. I mean, I enjoy him as an action star for the most part. Yeah.